Aside from murder, the two types of crimes that he was best known for were bank robberies and arson, and he had even more experience with these than he did killing. The year 2009 saw another return to his old ways, at least when it came to robbing banks. On the 10th, he arrived in Tupper Lake, a small village in New York. Tupper Lake, which had a population under 4,000 and has only decreased since, was the kind of place where serious crime is rare. The locals were entirely unprepared when a stranger in a bizarre and obviously fake disguise came into the community bank. He wore what one might typically expect a bank robber to wear: gloves, sunglasses, a beanie, and a jacket with the hood pulled over his head. He also had on a fake beard and mustache. One look at the grainy CCTV captured at the scene makes it clear that the hair is not his, but the material looks too patchy and uneven to be from some sort of costume. It looks almost as though it was real hair taken from someone. Keyes walked up to a bank teller and revealed the Smith & Wesson .40 caliber handgun he brought with him. He demanded that everyone in the bank get down on the floor until he got the cash. Keyes took off with $10,000, an amount he later described as being practically insignificant. Police failed to catch up with him, and this caused the local community to panic. Nothing like this had ever happened before. SWAT teams were called, and the local school district closed for the day in anticipation of any further danger. Thankfully, nobody in the area was hurt following the robbery, but the suspect was not caught either. What exactly did Keyes do with $10,000? He buried it. 15 treasure. I remember being a kid and thinking about how fun it would be to find buried treasure, Keyes recalled later in an FBI interview. So I decided to just bury some myself. Even with both he and Kimberly working, money was always somewhat tight, especially during the time that Sarah came up to Anchorage to live with them. The steady pay he earned from his job as a contractor and running his own company paid the bills, but Keyes was always traveling. Sometimes he needed money in a pinch, among other things. It is unknown when Isreal Keyes began burying what are now referred to as his kill kits, though some evidence suggests he may have been doing it prior to 2005, when a man hiking in the wilderness near Nia Bay made a disturbing discovery. Inside some sort of container were plastic trash bags, a pickaxe, duct tape, cable ties, and condoms. Disgusted and alarmed, the man immediately disposed of the items instead of reporting them. It would not be until many years later that he realized what he may have stumbled upon. The contents of the kill kits that had been linked to Keyes differ. Money is one such item he kept for future use, but it was not just any money. He only seemed to bury the money he gained from burglaries or bank robberies in case he needed some money on the road. This is exactly what he did following the bank robbery in Tupper Lake, NY. Along with the money, he also included at least 2 guns. He made the choice to bury the kit some distance away, in Essex, Vermont. When that was over, he went to stay in the Happy Suites Hotel for the night before returning to Anchorage. The plan seemed to be for him to spend some time cooling down before his next move. He was, after all, supposed to be a responsible family man. But crime amped Keyes up, and once he got going, it was difficult to stop. He chose instead to do something less drastic, less high stakes than robbery or murder. After a trip to Home Depot for parts, Keyes fashioned a silencer for one of his rifles. He attached it to his weapon and headed to a nearby park in West Anchorage. "I had big plans for that gun," he reminisced. "I wanted a gun I could carry under my jacket and put a silencer on pretty quick. It was my baby. Well, one of my babies." Keyes was later hesitant to go into exactly what those big plans were, but he did reveal that, around this time, he had been developing a new way to get victims. He liked the idea of being able to shoot at moving targets, specifically cars. If he could shoot out the tires on a passing vehicle, it could potentially open up a lot of possibilities for him. He explained, "One of the ideas I had for carjackings was to shoot out their tires while they were pulling up to a stop sign or something, but I didn't find any good roads or places to do it. I kind of had it in the back of my mind, but When you get out in the backwoods, people are kind of naive and don't really expect anything like that to happen to them. So you don't really have to do anything as crazy as shooting out their tires. But that's one of the ideas I've had. Partly because you're on a road with the right amount of traffic, you can set up in the right spot and sit there with binoculars and kind of stake out who is in the car. It's like shopping. It's in the evening, and there's not a lot of people around. It's on a backwoods road that gets a car every 5 or 10 minutes. You shoot out someone's tires. She's by herself. And she doesn't have much choice but to stop. If you shoot it out with a .22 in the sidewall, she's going to have to stop in half a mile of where you shoot it out. He got his chance to try out this idea one evening when Kimberly was away at work and Sarah was visiting family. Keyes sat in his car for hours, waiting and watching the people go by until it was finally getting dark. At around 10 o'clock, he set his sights on a young couple sitting in another car about 50 yards away. The thought of shooting with this latest addition on the weapon excited him far more in this instance than the possibility of actually hitting anyone. He made this trip out to the park with the sole intention of testing out the silencer, wanting to see if it worked well enough but could still scare people. If he managed to kill someone, it would have been an unexpected bonus, but not one he was particularly eager for. Keyes did not enjoy the thought of shooting people. Death would come too quickly if he aimed right. If he hit a non-vital part of the body, the victim would bleed out and writhe around, and it would be too messy and annoying. If he missed the target, he risked scaring them off before he could try again. He preferred to take things slowly. He liked to get up close and personal, just as long as he could remain in control the entire time. Right as he was about to shoot, however, a police officer drove by and told the teenagers that they had to leave the area. Now a different opportunity had presented itself, and Keyes felt a sudden surge of adrenaline. "I was thinking about shooting a cop," he explained. "Ever since I was a kid, it was like my white supremacist roots or something. I knew I was going to ambush a cop. And for some reason that night I had been sitting there long enough, and I was just bored enough and just amped up enough that I almost did it. Things went south when the cop called for backup. It was an odd move. The teenagers were compliant, and Keyes himself had not harmed anyone, or even been spotted. Nevertheless, it very well may have saved 3 lives that night. The teenagers left, frustrated. So did Keyes. Never one to give up, Keyes continued the hunt for someone else. It appears that he gave up on the silencer, or at least decided to save it for another time. He also made the decision to purchase a police scanner to prevent any unwanted surprises. Additionally, any crimes in Anchorage would, for now, cease. The way Alaska is set up is too risky. I decided to go back to my old stomping grounds back east. Of course, this is not a decision that was to last for long. Shortly after the failed sniping attempt on the couple, Keyes buried another kill kit near some hiking trails at the North Fork trailhead of the Eagle River. Allegedly, this kit contained weapons, a shovel, and Drano, a chemical cleaner intended for use in clogged drains, though its corrosive properties may be used for more unorthodox purposes. Per usual, the victim or victims were to be picked at random, anyone who had the misfortune of passing by Keyes' hiding place at the wrong time, but nobody ever did. It was clear to him that he would have to start doing things differently if he wanted to keep chasing the high he got from crime. From experience, patience was the best trait a hunter could have. There were no crimes in 2010 officially linked to Keyes. So, in 2011, Keyes knew it was time to follow through on his plan to return to the lower 48, to a place he buried some of his precious treasure 2 years earlier. 16. The Old Farmhouse. On June 2, 2011, Isreal Keyes flew from Anchorage to Seattle and then to Chicago. He rented a vehicle and headed east to visit family in Indiana and Maine, but he had another destination planned as well. When Keyes arrived back in Vermont on June 7th, he had a strong desire to see something burn. Arson was fun, but not something he got to do as often as he liked, so when he did do it, he wanted it to be big. He drove around searching for a perfect target. Perhaps feeling some lingering resentment towards his upbringing, he decided that he wanted to torch a local church. It was a thrilling idea, But it was not enough to satisfy him. Keyes was looking to up the ante, to do something even more depraved than starting a fire. He was no stranger to committing sexual violence, but all available evidence suggests that all the assaults he may have committed up to that point were perpetrated against girls and women. This time he wanted to abduct a man, take him to a church, rape him, and then burn the place down with the man still inside. Ultimately, however, he was unable to find a church that suited his needs. While driving, he happened to come across an old, abandoned farmhouse located on 32 Upper Main Street in Essex Junction, an incorporated village within the larger town of Essex. There was a for sale sign out front. Keyes stopped to get a closer look. The place was in bad shape. That's why I picked it. I could tell it was not a hot property, Keyes later explained. It was pretty much run down and unlivable inside. Right across the street from the house, which I thought was kind of funny at the time, there was a sheriff's car. It was definitely not the kind of place most people would have any interest in, but it was perfect for what he wanted. Keyes went to Happy Suites Hotel, where he had stayed back in 2009, and waited until the sun went down on that cold and rainy June 8th. He did not bother getting in his rented car and took off on foot. With a backpack full of supplies he had brought from home, he headed to find the kill kit he had buried 2 years prior. He was not surprised that it was still there, the bright orange 5-gallon bucket from Home Depot. Inside was a fair amount of treasure: guns, bullets, silencers, zip ties, blindfolds, and Drano. Next came the exciting part, picking the person he would kill. Armed with a .22 semi-automatic and a 10-20 seconds handgun and silencer, Keyes headed down the street. Though he did not really have any kind of preferred victim, other than vulnerable and available, that night Keyes was in search of someone with a good car, because he was hoping to rob a bank after he killed someone. About 100 feet from Handy Suites was the Cornerstone Commons apartment complex. He watched as a yellow Volkswagen came into view and pulled into a parking spot near where he was hiding. He was pleased to see that there was only one passenger, a man. The unknown man held up a newspaper to shield his head from the rain and headed towards the apartment building. Keyes made a move towards him. The man was fast, too fast. Before Keyes knew it, the stranger had already made it inside. Keyes cursed under his breath and headed back to his hotel room. He was not happy, but he had already gone through too much effort to give up so easily. Despite his first failure, he set his goal even higher. He wanted to have some extra fun, so he was going to kill a couple, and he was going to rape both of them. Nearing midnight, dressed all in black, he headed out again in a different direction. In less than a mile, he came to Colbert Street, a residential street lined with family homes, one of which was certain to contain a man and woman that would suit his needs. The process of choosing could not be completely random, however. He did have some hard limits. The one thing I won't do is mess with kids. I never really thought that way until I had Sarah, until she was born, Keyes later confessed. And then, after she was born, something kind of changed in the way that I thought, and I didn't want to do anything that would mess with kids. Keyes was less worried about guard dogs and security systems than he was about a backyard playground. As he scoped out houses, he looked for those that were bare of any sign that a child might live there. At last he found what he was looking for in a one-story white ranch house at 8 Colbert Street. The yard contained an above-ground pool as well as a barbecue, but there were no bikes or toys. He searched around the property in the dark until he found the phone line and cut it. Not only would the people inside not be able to call for help, but this also shut off any alarm systems that might have been installed. Using only a headlight to illuminate his way, Keyes broke into the garage by pushing in a fan. Inside, he found a crowbar and smashed the window of the door that led to the kitchen. Within seconds, Keyes found the bedroom with the couple still asleep inside. The startled pair were hardly able to react, as Keyes ordered them to roll onto their stomachs and then bound their arms and legs with zip ties. He demanded that they stay put and not do anything they would regret. Next, he wanted to know where they kept their valuables: money, jewelry, weapons, medications, anything. The couple lay helplessly as Keyes went through every room of their house. He took both of their cell phones, as well as a Ruger handgun, and placed them in a suitcase. In another suitcase, he stuffed in their personal items and clothing, including some of the wife's lingerie. He heard one of them pleading for their freedom, telling him that they had nothing worth stealing. After several agonizing minutes, he stopped rummaging around the room. The man and woman held their breaths in the hope that it was all over, but Keyes was just getting started. He had big plans for them both. He got the woman out of the bed and marched her through the house and out into the garage, her bare feet stepping over shards of glass. She was ordered to get into the front passenger seat of their green Saturn sedan and closed her eyes as the man touched her, his arms reaching over her torso to put the seatbelt on. Keyes left and returned moments later with the husband, putting him in the back seat. The realization that they were being kidnapped fully set in. Near tears, they begged Keyes to stop. He couldn't do this to them, they cried. They were nobody. They had nothing. There was less than $100 in their bank account, but he could take it, all of it, including their car, if he would just let them go, and they promised to never tell anyone what happened. Unmoved, Keyes only smirked. "Don't worry," he said. "You're being kidnapped for ransom. I'm bringing you to a drop house, and other people will take it from there. Trust me, you'll be fine." He brought them to the farmhouse and got the husband out first, leading him into the lightless basement through an outdoor entrance. In the pitch black of night, Keyes forced the man onto a stool and secured him to it tightly with a nylon rope. Outside in the car, the woman had been struggling furiously against her restraints. She had to break free and run somewhere, anywhere, and get help. As desolate as the farmhouse appeared, it was not that far from a busy road. If only she could just make it out to the street, then she had a chance. Finally, one of her zip ties snapped, and she managed to get the seatbelt off. She opened the door and jumped out, only to be met face to face again with her captor. She was breathless with fear. Keyes was not happy, and the woman could sense it. She screamed and sprinted towards the road, only to be tackled by Keyes within a moment. He got her back onto her feet, grabbed her tight, strong enough to drag her into the house and up the stairs like it was nothing. Inside one of the second-floor bedrooms was a dirty, stained mattress on an old bed. Keyes pushed the woman onto it and duct-taped her arms and legs to the posts. He tied another nylon rope under the bed and across her back. She writhed and pleaded and struggled the whole time. Suddenly, Keyes paused. He had heard something. It sounded like somebody was fumbling in the dark downstairs. "My wife!" cried the husband. "Where's my wife?" Grabbing one of his guns, Keyes rushed downstairs. In the dim light of his headlamp, he could see the man limping around. The stool was broken. He had not quite gotten free, but that was not going to stop him from searching around for something to fight back with. Unfortunately for the man, Keyes found it first. Keyes struck the man with a shovel, and even though he hit him hard, the man did not go down. Shaky, the man stayed on his feet, still looking, still coming at him. Enraged, Keyes hit him again, but the man was still moving. This was bad. Keyes couldn't help but think. This all should have been easier. These were two older people, ambushed in the middle of the night, and here he was, losing control of the situation. The man was getting up again. In a panic, Keyes shot him countless times, in the head, neck, chest, and limbs. What a waste! He had to kill him, but it happened so quickly that it had been completely unsatisfying. That was why he hated shooting people. The fun was over before it began. It left such a mess, too. At least there was still another person left, the woman upstairs, tied up and ready for him. Keyes went back up and stood at the foot of the bed, looking her up and down. She had gone to bed in a t-shirt and shorts, and he had packed some of her lingerie. Did he force her to wear it? A further humiliation on top of the brutal rape he was about to commit against her. He couldn't have her screaming her head off while he was trying to enjoy himself, so he shoved her mouth full of paper towels and duct-taped it shut. Before he finished, he wrapped his large hands around her neck and strangled her until she lost consciousness. In the short time she passed out, did she hope it had all been a nightmare. When she opened her eyes, she found herself seated on a stool. She was alone. Her unfocused eyes settled on something on the ground. To her horror, she realized that it was her husband, dead and lying in a pool of his own blood. Before she could even cry, she felt something wrapping around her neck. Keyes, a pair of batting gloves on his hands, stood behind her and strangled her to death with a rope. Once he was sure that both were dead, Keyes cut off their restraints and put each body in a large black trash bag. He poured Drano in both bags, making sure to coat as much of their bodies as possible to speed up decomposition. Then he tied the bags and rolled them into one of the corners of the basement. Whatever wood and debris he could find was placed on top of them to conceal them. By the time it was all over, it was early morning. The sun was coming up, and there were cars on the road. He would have to abandon his plan to set the place on fire or risk attracting too much attention. It didn't matter anyway, he told himself. Nobody wanted this house, and nobody was going to find these bodies anytime soon. 17. The missing couple. William Bill Currier and his wife Lorraine of Essex, Vermont, were described by everyone who knew them as a happy couple that had been together for over 25 years, perfect neighbors who mostly kept to themselves and were never harsh with each other. At 49 and 55 years old, respectively, the Curriers had no children together, but kept a few prized exotic birds and were close to their families. They were hard-working and honest people, the kind of people nobody would expect to become victims of violent crime. The couple got up on June 8, 2011, and went about their day. Bill went to work as a lab technician at the University of Vermont, while Lorraine headed to her job at the Fletcher Allen Healthcare Medical Center. They returned home to 8 Colbert Street after work and were seen by neighbors in their yard that evening. Then they were never heard from again. When Lorraine failed to show up to work the following morning, her sister-in-law, Diana, was concerned. She tried to get in touch with her but was unable to, so instead she called her brother, Bill. Nothing. She learned that he had not gone to work that day either. This was highly concerning. It was out of character for one of them to miss work without prior notice, but both of them at the same time? Diana called the Essex police and asked for them to do a welfare check on the Curriers. Nearly an hour after the call, the police arrived and took a look around. The first sign that something was seriously wrong was an obvious one. Shards of glass from the door connecting the garage to the kitchen were all over the floor, indicating that someone had broken in from there. Some of the Curriers' important items, such as Bill's diabetes medication and Lorraine's contact lenses, necessities in their daily lives, were still there. Missing was Lorraine's purse and handgun. The whole scene gave Essex Police Department Detective George Murdy a bad feeling. There was initially little evidence to suggest that a robbery had even taken place, but given what had been left behind, Murdy could not help but think that something more sinister had happened that night. He soon got the place closed off as an active crime scene. Meanwhile, the neighbors looked on. What could have possibly happened to their normal, polite neighbors? Some of the residents thought back to the previous night. At the time, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Perhaps the only odd thing was that some of the local dogs were behaving oddly, possibly due to anxiety, but their next-door neighbors had walked their own dog quite late that night right in front of the Currier home, and nothing seemed amiss. Another neighbor reported having heard a sound that she believed could have been a gunshot but later dismissed as thunder. Bill and Lorraine had no known enemies, meaning that there were no obvious suspects. The case came to a standstill until the 11th, when a former police officer reported that, on June 9th, he had narrowly avoided a collision with a green Saturn sedan that had been pulling out of a shopping center in the early afternoon. He had gotten a glimpse of the driver, but unfortunately, nothing about him stood out. All that could be said was that the driver was an adult male. The next day, the green sedan belonging to the Curriers was located beside a dumpster in the parking lot of an apartment complex a very short distance from their house. A search of the car found tiny glass shards on the floor of the front passenger seat. This was the same glass from the broken kitchen door window, meaning that one of the Curriers had likely been in the car after the break-in. Little progress could be made following the discovery of the car, but law enforcement kept searching for any sign of the couple. The Curriers, friends and loved ones reached out to the media to get the word out about the missing couple. They were offering $10,000 in exchange for information. Murdy contacted the FBI for assistance and got in contact with Special Agent Robert Drew, a member of the agency's critical response group of the behavioral science unit. Drew suggested looking further into the backgrounds of both Bill and Lorraine. They found very little of note. Bill liked to spend time online and maybe spent a little too much money on gadgets and entertainment media. Lorraine's past seemed more promising, but only just slightly. She had been married once to a physically abusive man, but he committed suicide after she left him. She also had right-wing political views that have since been described as extreme, and was a fan of both Glenn Beck and Rush Limbaugh. Other than that, the Curriers were just normal people. They were a quiet couple who filled their days with work and sometimes spent time with friends and family. They had never crossed anyone and really had nothing anyone would want to steal. They had less than $100 in their bank account when they vanished. The investigation slowed down considerably for several months. In late October, however, there was hope that something might have finally been found when police gained access to the Curriers' cell phone records. It showed that the final ping from one of their phones happened on the morning of June 9th. It had been picked up by a cell phone tower that was still in Essex, located near some woods. Several officers were sent out to search the area, but whatever had been there was long gone. Hope was fleeting fast. Detective Murdy was forced to confront the possibility that seemed more and more likely with each passing day. They were no longer looking for people who were alive. 18. The barista. On the evening of February 1st, 2011, 18-year-old barista Samantha Koenig was getting ready to close up shop for the night at the Common Grounds coffee stand. She was alone, but she did not mind much. This was her first job, and she had been working there for less than a month, though she had already managed to achieve a reputation as a responsible and diligent employee. Regulars at the coffee stand appreciated her friendly demeanor. Her father, James Koenig, had not been exactly thrilled when she landed the barista job. A teenage girl working a busy coffee stand all alone, especially at night, seemed like the kind of thing that would be a magnet for weirdos. If James had his way, he would have much preferred that his teenage daughter stayed home in the house they shared with her boyfriend, Dwayne. But Samantha was growing up. She wanted this job badly, and he felt he had no choice but to allow her. Of course, he always made sure to keep an eye on her. Just before 7 in the evening, during the time he knew she had a short break, he called to check in. Everything was fine. James's fears were assuaged. They would see each other soon when he went to pick her up. Unfortunately, James had been right to worry. In the parking lot of a nearby Home Depot, Isreal Keyes sat waiting. He was feeling good about the prospect of catching someone and had already taken some precautions. The car he was using that night was a white pickup truck, a 2004 Chevy Silverado. Both the color and model were extremely common here in Anchorage, and to blend in further, he removed anything from the truck that could make it identifiable. The metal rack that had been attached to the back was removed along with the front license plate. To play it safe, he kept the license plate on the back but made sure that most of the numbers were covered up by snow. His new police scanner was buzzing, relaying information about the goings-on around the city. Keyes listened carefully when a specific location was brought up. An incident had occurred on the other side of town that was major enough to warrant police presence. It meant that they would be busy, hopefully too busy to concern themselves with what Keyes was about to do. The Common Ground stand would be closing soon, so he made his move quickly. When he arrived, he could see Samantha cleaning up, so focused on her task that she failed to notice him. "Could I get an Americano, please?" he asked. The girl jolted, visibly startled, but put on her usual smile. "Sure. What size?" "Make it a large." "Okay. Just a second," she said as she turned around. She prepared the drink and went to give it to him. He pulled out a gun on her before she could utter another word. "This is a robbery." Samantha put her hands in the air. "Turn off all the lights," he demanded, and she complied. "My dad's coming to pick me up soon. He'll be here any minute now," said Samantha, her voice shaking. Keyes did not seem to care about this, so she tried something else. "They have surveillance cameras here, you know. If you rob this place, they'll figure out who you are, and the alarm will go off when I open the cash door. Besides, we really don't have much money here anyway." It was obvious to him that she was terrified, and that made him all the more excited. What she just told him presented some big risks, but her terror and the ease with which she complied made him feel more audacious than usual. He climbed over the counter and got close to her, securing her arms with zip ties. "What's your name?" he asked casually. "Sam." He grinned and pressed the gun against her side. "Well, Sam, we're going to go for a little walk. I'm going to be holding on to you. I want you to act like you're my girlfriend and you've had too much to drink, so it looks like I'm just helping you walk. Okay? Okay." As an extra measure, he grabbed a handful of napkins off the counter and shoved them into Samantha's mouth. They made it to his vehicle, and he helped her climb into the front passenger seat. "Do you have a debit card?" Samantha mumbled, unable to speak. He yanked out the napkins and asked again. "Yes, I share one with my boyfriend," she replied, "but I don't have it with me." "Then where is it?" It's in his truck." "So, where's his truck?" "He always parks at the same spot, on the street in front of our house." "What about a cell phone?" Keyes asked. Samantha was trembling. "My phone is in the coffee stand, but it's not working very well." She hadn't lied about the cell phone, but he was not sure if he believed her about the debit card. Keyes paused to think for a second before putting her seatbelt on. "Okay, listen, this is what's going to happen," he said. "We're going to go for a drive, and I'm going to hold you for ransom. I'll make a ransom demand to your family a little later." "My family doesn't have much money," she confessed. Keyes chuckled, undeterred. "Don't worry, they'll get the money somehow." "I'll take care of it, but you need to do exactly as I say." "Got it?" she agreed. "We're going to drive around for a while, and you're going to keep your head turned towards me. Don't look out the windows or try to signal to anyone. If you do, I'll notice, and you won't like what will happen." Samantha did not dare disobey him as he drove around. She could hardly move, but her mind was racing. At one point, the truck stopped at a red light, and she saw two police cruisers right next to them. What could she do to get their attention, especially when it was so dark? It was painful to have to remain still when help was possibly so close. Keyes briefly returned to the coffee stand to retrieve Samantha's phone. Inside the stand again, he carefully arranged everything so that nothing looked awry. He was pleased when he got back into the truck and Samantha had not made an effort to escape. This was short-lived, however, because she started talking. "Mister, I don't mean to bother you," she said quietly. "But I really need to pee," Keyes growled. "All right. I'll find some place for you to go." In the meantime, he wanted to enjoy himself a little more. Samantha watched him take out a cigar, lit it, and took a long drag before handing it to her. "Want to share this?" he asked. Samantha was confused, but did not dare say no. Keyes put the cigar to her lips and waited until she took a puff. After a moment, she thought to try talking again. "So did you go to school around here?" Keyes was not going to play along. He knew this game. She was trying to become familiar in the hopes that he would lose his nerve. "Shut up," he barked. "Where did you get those cigars?" she asked. "They're really good." "I said shut up." They continued in silence until he came to a wooded area and allowed her to step outside to relieve herself. Later, they came to the house he shared with Kimberly and forced Samantha into a shed right next to it. There was a rope attached to the wall that he tied around her neck, allowing her limited mobility. He cut the zip ties and instead tied them again in front of her. There was a bucket that would serve as a toilet. Keyes warned her that he was stepping out to take care of a few things and asked for the location of her house to find Dwayne's truck and their shared debit card. He made sure she knew that he still had the police scanner on and would come back immediately if he thought she somehow contacted the authorities. He also set up a radio at full volume to drown out any cries for help. Hours later, he came back and told Samantha that all was going according to plan. Any hopes Samantha had that she would be freed soon were dashed when he forced her to get down on her belly. She wept as he raped her, strangled her, and killed her. 19. The Hunt. I'm going to a friend's house for a few days. Tell my dad I love him. You won't hear from me until I come home. Dwayne Tortolani read the text message repeatedly. It was a strange one, unlike any other message his girlfriend Samantha had ever sent him before. He and James Koenig were already worried since Samantha had not come home that night. It was well after midnight when he received the text, and it had been nagging him ever since. If Samantha had been upset with him before she left for her shift that Wednesday, she showed absolutely no sign of it. When a few more hours passed without sight of Samantha, Dwayne and James contacted Michelle Robbins, owner of the Common Grounds coffee stand, who agreed that it was highly out of character for Samantha to have left without closing up shop properly. She pulled up that night's security footage and was horrified to see her employee being abducted by a tall, shadowy figure. The next few days became a media frenzy. Posters were distributed all over Anchorage with her name and photo on them. James Koenig, near tears, appeared publicly and announced a $12,500 reward for information leading to her safe return. Frustratingly, the case came to almost a complete standstill, aside from a false lead involving an associate of Samantha's. On February 24th, Dwayne received another text from Samantha. "Connor Park sign, under pic of Albert, ain't she purty?" The two men immediately headed for Connor's Bog Dog Park and located a flyer for a missing dog named Albert tacked to a pole. Underneath the flyer was a typed ransom note demanding $30,000 be deposited into Samantha's account, as well as a photograph of her. The photo was eerie. Her eyes were open, and she was holding a newspaper showing the day's date, but there was something off about it. This demand, however, turned out to be a wrong move on Keyes' part. He left Alaska and returned to the lower 48 because he knew that the odds of him being caught with her debit card in Anchorage were high. For several days, he traveled from state to state until he was finally caught on camera on March 10, 2012, at an ATM in Humble, Texas, while using Samantha's card. Police put out a bolo, "Be on lookout," alert to neighboring departments. They caught up to him on March 13th and arrested him in Lufkin, Texas. Sadly, Isreal Keyes would never truly face justice. Conclusion. Even in custody, Isreal Keyes did not like to give up control. He toyed with his interrogators, teasing them with clues and information about crimes he may or may not have committed. In exchange for an Americano, cigar, or candy bar, he would give them some of his story, if they were lucky. Finally, he decided he would cooperate if they could give him an execution date and keep his name out of the press. He did not want his daughter to know the kinds of things he was involved with. The house he shared with Kimberly and Sarah was raided, and his computer was taken. Police found countless names of missing people, including the couriers. Other names have been investigated as being possibly linked to Keyes, but none have been officially tied to him. Keyes told them what he had done to Samantha after her death, dismembered her, and, under the guise of fishing, discarded her remains in Matanuska Lake. A dive team set out, plunged into the freezing waters, and managed to retrieve her piece by piece. Families of his victims and possible victims would never get justice. While being held in the Anchorage Correctional Complex, he somehow managed to get hold of a razor blade. While the guard on duty was distracted, Keyes slit his wrists and bled out while he pretended to be asleep. He left behind 2 notes, 11 skulls and a pentagram with the words, "We are one," all drawn with his own blood. The other read the following: "Where will you go, you clever little worm, if you bleed your host dry? Back in your ride, the night is still young. Streetlights push back the black Ainit rose. Off to the right a graveyard appears. Lines of stones, bodies molder below. Turn away quick, bob your head to the seat, as straight through that stop sign you roll loaded truck, with lights off slams into you broadside, your flesh smashed as metal explodes. You may have been free, you loved living your lie, fate had its own scheme, crushed like a bug you still die. Soon, now, you'll join those ranks of dead, or your ashes the wind will soon blow. Family and friends will shed a few tears, pretend it's off to heaven you go. But the reality is you were just bones and meat, and with your brain died also your soul. Send the dying to wait for their death in the comfort of retirement homes. Quietly/quickly say, "It's for the best. It's best for you, so their fate you'll not know." Turn a blind eye back to the screen. Soak in your reality shows. Stand in front of your mirror and you preen in a plastic castle you call home. Land of the free, land of the lie, land of scheme, Americanize. Consume what you don't need, stars you idolize. Pursue what you admit is a dream, then it's American die. Get in your big car so you can get to work fast, on roads made of dinosaur bones. Punch in on the clock and sit on your ass, playing stupid-ass games on your phone. Paper on your wall says you got smarts. The test that you took told you so, but you would still crawl like the vermin you are once your precious power grid's blown. Land of the free, land of the lie, land of the scheme, Americanize. Now that I have you held tight, I will tell you a story, speak soft in your ear, so you know that it's true. You are my love at first sight, and though you're scared to be near me, my words penetrate your thoughts now, in an intimate prelude. Send the dying to wait for their death in the comfort of retirement homes. Quietly/quickly say, "It's for the best. It's best for you, so their fate you'll not know." Turn a blind eye back to the screen. Soak in your reality shows. Stand in front of your mirror and you preen in a plastic castle you call home. Land of the free, land of the lie, land of scheme, Americanize. Consume what you don't need, stars you idolize. Pursue what you admit is a dream, then it's American die. Get in your big car so you can get to work fast, on roads made of dinosaur bones. Punch in on the clock and sit on your ass, playing stupid-ass games on your phone. Paper on your wall says you got smarts. The test that you took told you so, but you would still crawl like the vermin you are once your precious power grid's blown. Land of the free, land of the lie, land of the scheme, Americanize. Now that I have you held tight, I will tell you a story, speak soft in your ear so you know that it's true. You're my love at first sight, and though you're scared to be near me, my words penetrate your thoughts now in an intimate prelude. Violent metamorphosis. Emerge my dark moth princess. I would come often and worship on the altar of your flesh. You shudder with revulsion and try to shrink far from me. I'll have you tied down and begging to become my Stockholm sweetie. Okay, talk is over, words are placid and weak. Back it with action or it all comes off cheap. Watch close while I work now. Feel the electric shock of my touch. Open my trembling flower, or your petals I'll crush. Isreal Keyes died on December 2nd, 2012. He was 34 years old. We may never know how many secrets he took to the grave. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed this Audible book written by Geneva Ortiz. Thank you for allowing me to use your work as art and education. Hope you enjoy 12-Gauge Investigative and continue to come back for more real true crime. Till next time, watch your 6.